My dad's been an MTA transit subway station manager for 35 years. In his line of work, there always has to be a manager on duty, every hour, every day. That means he's worked through just about every shift imaginable, including more night shifts than most people would care to count. He's told me plenty of bizarre and even funny stories from those graveyard hours. But there's one that stands out. One he's never told with a laugh. In fact, it's the only time I've seen him hesitate before speaking. It happened during one of his usual late-night transfers. He had just boarded a train to head to another station where his office was located. It was around 3 in the morning. The train car, as expected at that hour, was completely deserted. That, he used to say, was one of the few perks of the night shift, riding alone in total silence. But that night was different. At the very next station, the train doors slid open with a hiss, and a man stepped on board. My dad described him as tall, white, and painfully thin. He was bundled in a heavy jacket, despite it not being that cold, and wore a tight beanie pulled low over his forehead. The guy gave my dad a quick glance, nothing overtly threatening, but there was something about it that didn't sit right. Then, without a word, he walked to the farthest corner of the car and sat down, facing away. Still, my dad could feel it, that nagging itch of being watched. Every so often, the man would look up. Not long, not obvious, but just enough to make it known. Just enough to make it unsettling. When my dad's stop finally came, he stood up and exited the train. So did the man. Trying not to appear concerned, my dad made his way to the office tucked inside the station, pulled out his keys, and unlocked the door. Before stepping in, something made him glance back. The man in the jacket was still there, just 50 feet away, slowly pacing in small circles, like he was waiting for something or someone. My dad slipped inside the office, shut the door firmly behind him, and locked it. He sat down at his desk, the silence pressing in again. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, watchful. And then, 5 minutes later, the doorknob began to turn. Whoever was on the other side quickly discovered it was locked. There was a pause. Then came a soft, almost polite knock. My dad didn't answer at first. He just listened. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forceful. But it was insistent, steady enough to make the hairs on the back of his neck rise. Finally, he called out, "Who is it?" A voice answered, calm and clear, "I want to talk." My dad didn't even bother entertaining the idea. He knew trouble when he saw it. He said something about the guy had given off a vibe from the moment he boarded the train. That sixth sense, the one that whispers when something just isn't right, it was screaming now. "Go away," he said firmly. But the knocking continued, soft, repetitive. 5 minutes of it, non-stop. He finally turned to the monitors on his desk and pulled up the security camera feeds. His fingers moved fast, heart pounding now, until he found the angle facing his office door. There he was. The same man, jacket, beanie, standing just inches from the door, head tilted ever so slightly, as if listening. And then, as though he knew he was being watched, right at the exact moment the screen came into view, the man turned and walked away. So, after locking the door behind him, my dad went about his duties inside the office. Routine stuff, the kind of work that filled the dead silence of those late shifts. About 30 minutes passed, just enough time for his nerves to settle a little. Still, something gnawed at the back of his mind, like a chill that never quite left the room. Eventually, it was time to head out and catch the next train. But before stepping outside, he did what any cautious person would do. He checked the security feed first. The hallway outside his office was empty. No sign of the strange man, no slow pacing, no silhouette lingering by the door. He locked the office, double-checked it, then made his way down the narrow stairwell to the platform. The dim fluorescent lighting flickered overhead as he descended, buzzing faintly like a dying insect trapped in a bulb. The train was already there, idling in the station with its doors open, humming low like it was holding its breath. He stepped inside quickly, taking a seat near the window. And then he saw him. The man, descending the same stairs, one step at a time, with an eerie calmness that sent a jolt through my dad's spine. He didn't hesitate. He stepped into the same car, and walked halfway down the aisle before settling into a seat directly across from my dad, just a few seats to the right. There was a brief moment where my dad thought maybe he was imagining it. Maybe it wasn't the same guy. But no, it was. The jacket, the beanie, the pale, stretched face. That same hollow stillness clung to him like a shadow. Trying not to show fear, my dad turned his head and looked out the window, pretending not to notice. But he could feel it, that heavy stare digging into the side of his face like needles under the skin. Eventually, unable to resist any longer, he glanced back. The man was locked on him, unmoving. My dad forced a small nod, followed by the faintest smile. Some desperate attempt at disarming tension, like waving a white flag in the dark. Then he quickly turned his head away again. He didn't look at him for the rest of the ride, not once. But the man never stopped staring. Now, you might be wondering, why didn't he confront him, say something, demand that he back off? Well, despite his size, and my dad is a big guy, he's never been one for confrontation. No bark, no bite. He's a gentle soul at heart, a teddy bear in a uniform. And in that moment, he felt something deeper than just fear. He felt danger. He said it was the way the man carried himself, the tension in his stillness,
The possibility that one wrong move, one quick motion, could end in something unthinkable. Maybe the guy had a weapon, maybe he didn't, but my dad wasn't about to find out. When the train pulled into the next station, the doors slid open with a hiss, and my dad didn't wait. He practically bolted out of the car, heading up the stairs 2 at a time, his heart hammering with each step.
And yes, when he looked over his shoulder, the man was behind him, following. His footsteps echoed faintly off the cold tiles as he trailed my dad at a steady pace. There was no yelling, no rush, just the quiet, deliberate movements of someone who wasn't in a hurry, but wasn't going to stop either. Out on the street, the night air hit him like a slap, but it didn't slow him down. He scanned the blocks desperately, eyes searching for any kind of open building, somewhere, anywhere public, somewhere with lights, people, witnesses. That's when he spotted it. A Wendy's, of all places, still open. He pushed through the doors, breath caught in his throat, and stepped inside. Warm lighting, the smell of fryer grease and stale air. A bored teenager behind the counter. But it was safe, for now. He found a seat by the window, heart still racing, and looked outside. And there he was. The man had followed him to the Wendy's. He stood outside the window, motionless, staring straight at my dad through the glass. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. The moment stretched on like a frozen second. 10 long, breathless seconds. And then, without warning, the man turned. He walked away slowly, crossing the street and disappearing down the sidewalk, swallowed up by the shadows of the empty night. My dad sat in that Wendy's a while longer, pretending to sip from an empty soda cup just to give himself a reason to stay put. He didn't want to leave, not yet. Not until he was sure the guy was really gone. When he finally stepped outside, the streets were empty again. Cold, still, silent. He kept his head low, walking quickly but carefully, eyes darting to every alleyway, every passing shadow. His nerves were frayed, but he had one last stop to make, his third and final station for the night. It was supposed to be routine. Just check in, log some data, and wait for the next scheduled sweep. But nothing about the rest of that night would feel routine. Once inside the office at the third station, he closed the door gently, locked it behind him, and let out a long breath. The fluorescent lighting above flickered to life with a soft buzz. Still alone. Still safe. Maybe. But the paranoia hadn't left, not even close. Something compelled him to check the cameras. Not protocol, just instinct. That same icy feeling crawling along his skin like static. He sat down, tapped a few keys, and pulled up the exterior feed of the station. And froze. There he was. The man from the train. pacing outside the station about 30 feet from the office. Same heavy jacket, same beanie, same strange stillness in his movements, like he was rehearsing something or holding back. My dad watched in stunned silence as the man wandered slowly in a tight loop, just outside the frame of safety. He never came close to the door, never knocked this time, just paced. And then he stopped. He turned his head toward the camera, toward my dad, and stared. Not just a passing glance, not a moment of awareness. He stared directly into the lens, eyes locked onto it, like he knew exactly where my dad was sitting. According to my dad, he didn't move a muscle for at least a full minute. Just stood there, face unreadable, eyes hollow and dark. It was as if time had frozen. And then, slowly, mechanically, he lowered his head, turned away, and walked out of frame, out of frame, out of my dad's life, forever. To this day, my dad has never seen him again, never heard anything, no reports, no incidents, no answers. He still doesn't know if the man had followed him from the Wendy's, but deep down, he suspects it. The timing, the appearance, the calculated pacing, all of it lined up too closely. Whoever that man was, he was disturbed, possibly homeless, possibly dangerous. But the most haunting part, my dad still has no idea what he actually wanted. And maybe it's better that way. It was around Christmas time when me and my 3 friends found ourselves in New York, wandering the city late into the night. The streets were glowing with lights, festive music echoing from stores that had already closed for the evening. It was beautiful, but cold, and we were tired. We didn't end up heading home until maybe 2 in the morning. We caught the first train we could find. Just as expected, the car was completely empty. Quiet, still, that eerie stillness that only seems to exist in public places meant to be crowded. We were mostly sobered up by that point, worn out from the night, just looking forward to getting home. Then it started. A sudden, sharp commotion in the next car over. The kind of noise that snaps you out of whatever daze you're in. We all turned, leaning toward the glass door that connected our car to the next one. And that's when we saw them. 2 men, young, maybe just teenagers, hoods up, standing uncomfortably close to a woman sitting alone in one of the seats. She was screaming, desperate. Her voice cracked through the car. "Help! Help me!" It was high-pitched and raw, the kind of scream that makes your chest tighten. My first reaction was pure adrenaline. "Let's go over there and kick their asses," I said, already stepping forward. But as me and one of my buddies got a closer look, everything changed. They were armed. Both of them had handguns, barely concealed, and it instantly turned the situation from a tense scene to something out of a nightmare. Panic set in. I grabbed my friends, shoving them back and away from the connecting door. "Move! Go! Now!" I hissed, forcing all of them into the next car. I turned for one last glance behind us and saw one of the men pointing right at us. Then, without hesitation, he started coming. We ran, full speed, through one car, then another, then another. The metallic clanking of our shoes echoed against the empty train, our breath coming in short, terrified bursts. Behind us, I could hear them, fast, determined, closing in. The echo of pursuit is a sound you never forget. Finally, mercifully, the train screeched to a halt at the next station. We didn't hesitate. The doors opened and we bolted into the old, crumbling station. Cold tile underfoot, walls stained with age and time. The place felt abandoned, like it hadn't been touched in years. We just needed to find somewhere, anywhere, to hide. That's when it happened. I got separated. My friends darted down one corridor, while I veered off in another, heart pounding in my throat. I scanned my surroundings desperately, trying to find cover. And then I saw it. A large garbage can in the corner near a wall. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. I ducked behind it, crouching low and trying to still my breathing. The air smelled of mildew and wet concrete. My muscles trembled, not from the cold, but from fear, the kind that paralyzes you. Then I heard them. Footsteps, hard soles slapping against the tiled floor, getting louder, closer. One of them called out, voice sharp and urgent. They were hunting us, hunting me. I slowly, carefully, peeked through the narrow gap at the top of the bin, just enough to get a look. They passed by just ahead, close enough that I could see their faces now under the dim, flickering lights. One was black, the other Indian. Both of them looked young, barely older than us, teenagers maybe. And for a second, I tried to convince myself they just want to rob us, nothing more. Until I heard it. If you find them, kill them. I don't know how I didn't scream. I felt my lungs seize, my throat contract, like something was trying to rip its way out. The words hit me like ice in the veins. Kill them. That wasn't desperation. That wasn't bluff. That was intent. I almost blew my cover right then and there, reflexively gasping, nearly knocking the garbage bin over as I jolted back down into cover. My heart was thundering in my chest, loud enough I was sure they could hear it. But somehow, they didn't. They kept walking. No guns drawn, no shouting, just gone. I waited, counted to 30, to 60, then finally peeked again. The hallway was empty. I didn't even think. I just ran, full speed, in the opposite direction of where they'd gone. My feet echoed across the floor again, louder than before, because now it was mixed with pure terror. That's when I saw them, my friends, waving frantically from behind one of the station's thick support pillars, faces pale and wide-eyed. I sprinted toward them, not looking back. We were together again. But we weren't safe. Not yet. I crouched low and took cover with my friends behind another thick concrete pillar, just a short distance from the one where they'd spotted me. None of us said a word. We were all still catching our breath, adrenaline pumping so hard it made our fingers shake. The station around us was dead silent, except for the distant hum of old wiring and the faint rustle of wind sweeping through the underground tunnels. We waited until we thought it was safe, or at least safer than it had been a few moments ago. But then, just when we thought the worst had passed, something happened that completely flipped everything we thought we understood about the situation. From the far end of the station, we caught sight of someone approaching. It was her, the woman from the train, the one we'd seen screaming, crying for help, "Help! Help me!" surrounded by those two hooded men. Only now, she wasn't screaming, she wasn't panicked. She was walking with calm purpose, scanning the station as she moved, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Where are they? Don't tell me you didn't get them!" We froze. Every one of us just froze. She wasn't afraid of them. She knew them. She was with them. From beyond the corner, the two men reappeared, no longer running, no longer hunting, just strolling casually toward her like they were meeting up with a friend after a failed errand. They stood together, forming a small triangle just a few yards from where we hid, their voices now lowered to a murmur. We couldn't make out exactly what they were saying, but it was clear. They weren't strangers. They weren't attackers and victim. They were a team. A setup. A trap. Everything, the screaming, the helplessness, the tension in the train car, had all been a performance, a lure to bait someone like us into getting involved. And it nearly worked. We watched them for another moment as they finished their hushed conversation. Then, without another word, the three of them began walking back down the stairwell, descending toward the platforms. We didn't follow. We didn't move. We just watched from our hiding spot, numb with disbelief. It didn't take much to guess what they were doing next. They were setting it up again, waiting for the next train, the next late-night crowd, the next Good Samaritan to fall into their twisted little game. We did the only thing we could do. We called the police. reported what we'd seen, the weapons, the pursuit, the woman's strange involvement, every piece of it. But honestly, I have no idea if they were ever caught. For all I know, they're still out there, still riding empty trains, still baiting late-night passengers with staged screams and carefully placed panic. And that might be the most terrifying part. My name is Danny. I'm 22 years old, and what I'm about to tell you was, without a doubt, the most horrifying experience of my life. I live and work in New York City. Like most people here, I don't have a car, so the subway is my lifeline. I ride it daily. I know the ins and outs, the late-night schedules, the quirks of each line. It's routine. It was a Saturday night when this happened. I was heading home from a party. Nothing wild, just your typical weekend hangout. It was the middle of the night, probably close to 2 a.m. I'd done this a dozen times before, maybe more. Every other weekend, I found myself making that same trip home, and I was always fine riding the subway alone at night. It never really bothered me. But that night, something felt different. I remember walking down the stairs into the station, the city's noise fading behind me. The air grew colder with each step, heavy and still. The underground was completely deserted, not a soul in sight. Just that low mechanical hum echoing through the tunnel and the occasional clang of distant metal. This particular station was one of the older ones, narrow, claustrophobic, the kind of place where sound traveled too far and shadows stretched too long. As I walked along the platform, I felt this creeping sensation crawl up my back, that familiar, primal feeling, like someone was watching me, or worse, following me. Every now and then, there was a strange bang in the distance, an echoing metallic clang from somewhere deep in the tunnel. I told myself it was just the pipes or a loose piece of metal, but deep down, I wasn't convinced. I was early. The next train wouldn't arrive for at least another 10 minutes. So I sat on the cold metal bench, staring at the tracks, letting my thoughts drift. And then I heard it, a voice. Clear, mocking. "Over here, buddy." I froze. It sounded like something straight out of a horror movie. I turned my head slowly, and that's when I saw him. There was a man standing on the tracks. Not walking, not moving, just standing there. Inside the tunnel, half hidden in darkness, poking his head around the concrete wall. He was filthy, hair matted, skin smeared with grime. I'd guess he was in his early 40s, though it was hard to tell beneath the layers of filth. He smiled at me. A horrible, rotting grin, the color of infection. At least 3 teeth were missing. The others were yellow and crooked, and even from where I sat, I could see them. I tried to act like I hadn't seen him. I looked away, pretended I hadn't heard the voice. But he didn't stop. He didn't move. He didn't leave. He just kept smiling, head cocked, like he was watching an animal in a cage. Then came the laughter. Low at first, almost like chuckling, but then louder from somewhere deeper inside the tunnel. Another face appeared beside the first. This man looked just as vile, dirty, wild-eyed, hollow-cheeked, like he'd been living in that tunnel for years. He flashed a grin of his own, and in a raspy, slurred voice called out, "Come on down here. Come hang out with us in the tunnel." My blood turned to ice. The way they looked at me, their eyes didn't move. They didn't blink. It was like their gaze was fixed, locked onto me in a way that didn't feel human. Not curious, not threatening. Obsessive. As if I were already theirs. I tried, really tried to ignore them. I kept my eyes forward, hands tight in my lap, pretending like this wasn't happening, like they weren't still there, like this wasn't the stuff of nightmares. I just needed the train. That was the only thing I could focus on. Wait for the train. Get on. Get out. Simple. Just a few more minutes. But then, something shifted in the edge of my vision. One of the men, the first one, stepped backward into the darkness of the tunnel. For a moment, he was gone. And then he came back. He wasn't alone. I blinked. There was a third face now. But something about it was off, wrong. The face was slack, the head limp, like a rag doll being propped up. One of the men was gripping it by the hair, holding it up by the scalp as if to show me. The eyes were half closed, the mouth hung open, lifeless. I stared for a second too long, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. My stomach lurched, my hands began to tremble. That was a body. No, not a body. Just a head. A severed human head. Before I could fully react, before the panic could fully overtake me, I heard it. The sound of the train. The low thunder of steel against steel, growing louder by the second. It was like salvation, like 1,000 pounds being lifted off my chest. I stood up, fast, heart pounding against my ribs, and stepped toward the edge of the platform, ready to get the hell out of there. And that's when I saw it. Closer now. The two men were moving back into the tunnel, shadows swallowing them with every step. But the second man, the one lagging behind, was still holding something. I looked closer, and my stomach nearly gave out. It was the head, still in his hand, dangling by the hair. The dim lighting overhead flashed against the slick skin like it was fresh. They didn't run. They didn't hide. They just disappeared, slowly, into the side of the tunnel, like rats retreating to the walls. The train screeched into the station just moments later. I didn't wait. I stepped into the first car the moment the doors slid open, eyes wide and chest tight, planning to tell the conductor everything, warn him, call the police, something. But no sooner had the doors closed than we started moving again, and I realized I didn't want to be in that station for even one more second. I backed away from the window, trying to catch my breath. As the train pulled away, I glanced back, just one last look, and that's when I saw them. Legs. Someone, something descending the stairwell toward the platform. Just legs, slow and deliberate. I didn't get to see the face, and honestly, I didn't want to. But what I did see next, I'll never forget. As the train entered the tunnel, the windows darkened, but not completely. And in the faint, flickering light, pressed against the railing just inches from the train, there was a group of them. Men, at least 4 or 5, hunched, crouched low, their faces close to the glass, watching me. All of them, their eyes locked on mine as the train moved past, their heads tilting ever so slightly in unison. Not speaking, not blinking, just staring. I didn't waste a second. I rushed up to the conductor's door, banging on it like a lunatic, fists slamming the metal as I shouted at the top of my lungs, "Emergency! Open up! It's an emergency!" The door creaked open just enough for him to peer out, confused and clearly startled. I must have looked insane, sweating, wide-eyed, pale as a ghost, but I didn't care. I spilled everything I had seen in a frantic rush. The men on the tracks, the tunnel, the severed head, the way they were watching me. His face shifted slowly from confusion to concern. He didn't waste time. He grabbed the radio and called it in, first to someone stationed at the previous platform, then to someone higher up, a supervisor, I think. Whoever it was, he made it sound urgent, and I could only hope they took it seriously, took care of it, or at least contacted the proper authorities, security, police, someone. But even after telling him, I didn't feel safe. Not really. The ride felt like it went on forever, like the train had slowed to a crawl, every second dragging across my skin. I kept looking out the window, afraid to see another face, another stare, another figure waiting just outside the glass. But nothing came. Finally, my stop arrived. The doors slid open and I practically leapt out. The moment my feet hit the platform, my legs nearly buckled beneath me. I started walking, fast, then faster, not slowing until I reached the stairs and made it back up to the cold air of the streets. I can't describe the relief of breathing that city air again, even if it smelled like garbage and exhaust. At least it meant I was out. Since that night, I've only been to one more party at that same friend's place. Just one. And even then, I refused to use that station again. Not ever. I took the extra long walk to the next one over, even though it added another 20-30 minutes to my trip. I didn't care. It was worth it. Because something about that place, something deep in those tunnels, it wasn't right. I don't know if weird stuff like that happens often in the subway at night. Honestly, up until that night, nothing like that had ever happened to me, not once. But after that, after what I saw, after what I lived through, let me just say this. If you ever find yourself alone in a subway station late at night and it feels too quiet, too still, trust that feeling. Be careful, be alert, and above all, don't assume you're alone, because you might not be.